Hey guys, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Sarah if you're new here. Thanks for joining us. Today I'm gonna show you 3 kinds of homemade bread that I make. My requirements for almost all recipes, including homemade bread, is I like things simple and I like things healthy. I'm also gonna give you 3 different types of bread to make for different lifestyles. I'm going to give you a very simple bread that you can make in your oven. I'm also gonna give you a bread recipe that I make with my mixer that I can have done in just over an hour's time. And then I'm also gonna give you a loaf that I put in our bread makers. Yes, we have 2 bread makers. We have a family of 10 kids, so 12 of us. Right now we are running out of bread that we need. Some of you may be in the same position right now, so I thought it might be a good time to share all 3 of these recipes, and you might find one that works for you. I tend to go for recipes that have whole wheat flour. Here's one of them. Whole wheat flour and no sugar. So that's what these recipes involve, although some of them have honey as a sweetener. I also like recipes that don't take a lot of my time because, as you can imagine, I don't have a lot of extra time for making bread. I will show you one of these recipes with white flour. I've never made it that way, but I'm gonna make it with you. Okay, so let's get started. Are you ready, Eli?
To do what?
Make bread.
I'm not gonna do it.
One more thing before I get started. Let's get this first thing straight. I am not over here making up my own bread recipes. That's my 5-year-old. She's singing for you. I'm not making up my own bread recipes. That is just not happening. And I don't want you to think I am. So I'm going to link the recipes down below from the websites that I got them from. The kind of bread I'm making does not appeal to you, I encourage you to keep looking because making bread is pretty fast and easy. It can be, doesn't have to be a long process, and you can keep searching for the recipe that is right for you and your family. First up, I think, is the easiest of all the breads. The only hard thing about it is the best time to start it is yesterday. That's right, it sits out for a long time, like 12 to 18 hours. I do it in a Dutch oven. I think you need to have a Dutch oven, although if you have a pan covered or a pot covered, I've read that that mostly works for people. So this one I'm gonna mix up in this bowl, and I usually do it with whole wheat flour. I use the whole wheat flour recipe, but today I'm gonna try the white flour too. And then tomorrow I'll come back and show you the end of it because I'll let it sit out all afternoon, all night, and cook it tomorrow. Bread can be tricky, and I know my bread machine recipes are the first ones I started with for a long time, and I had to be very precise, so I am just precise with all bread recipes. So instead of just putting my measuring cup into my flour and scooping it out, I spoon it in there and then scrape the top off with a knife. Yeah. So we're starting out with 4 cups of whole wheat flour. Next is 2 teaspoons of salt. And 3/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. And finally 2 cups of water at room temperature. That's it. I'm just mixing this together. Now don't laugh at me, but we just did a lot of meal prepping and all my big bowls are being used to store food. So I have a bowl that barely works for this. Mixed it all up, and because of the rising situation, I am gonna have to find something bigger to store it in. I'm gonna cover it with plastic wrap, and then I can leave it on my counter all night for the next 12 to 18 hours. When it's winter here, we do keep our house pretty cold, and so in the winter, I have kept it in the oven with just the oven light on. Not the oven on, just the oven light on, and that has worked well too. My youngest baby, Seth, woke up and needed to eat, so my oldest child, Judah, walked through the room and said he would make the white loaf for me. So we did 3 cups of white flour, and then 1 3/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of active dry yeast, and 1.5 cups of room temperature water. Made up that loaf. And I know I have a friend that used to tell me never use a metal spoon or a metal bowl when using yeast, but I had to look it up because I only had metal bowls left, and apparently that's more if you're making acidic type of breads or whatever. The yeast won't work, or it kills the yeast, I guess. And we have something to blame it on if these loaves don't turn out. I think they'll be fine though. As a side note, I do really want my kids to just know how to make a simple loaf of bread, and a lot of them made machine bread for me before, but this is the bread recipe that I really want them to know, because I tease them if they're ever broke in college and all they need to have is some flour, some yeast, and some salt, and they can make themselves a really nice loaf of bread. It's not only the easiest recipe, it is also the cheapest. I was going to make the other bread loaves for you yesterday too, but things got a little wild around here and that didn't happen. This is the next day. It is time to put our loaves in the oven. They rose nicely. That one rose more than I'm usually getting a rise, and the white one that I've never done is huge and bubbly and looks pretty wet. Judah did have a problem with, he did the white one and he had a problem with it coming together, so he added a tiny bit of water, like half a teaspoon, and then it was gooey. So then he added a little more flour, so I'm not sure how that one will come out, but I think it'll be okay. So what I did is I put my Dutch oven in the oven. I set my oven for 475 so that the Dutch oven got really hot with it, and now I'm gonna pull that out. I'm gonna put my loaf on some parchment paper, get it all ready, like make it into a ball, and then I will plop that parchment paper right in the bottom of the Dutch oven. I didn't use any flour at all, I just plopped it in there. It looks fine to me. All right, I got it back in the oven. It's gonna cook for 30 minutes, and then I'm gonna take the top off of the Dutch oven and let it sit in there for another 15 to 20 minutes, and it should be done. How fast and easy, right? This loaf looks so good. It's the perfect time to loaf for dinner as a side dish. We've also used it many times for lunch. We just chunk it up. I kind of cut it like a cake or a pie and give kids chunks with some cheese and meat on the side, and it feels very European. And all the Europeans probably laughed at me for that one. This is lunch for one of my little ones. I turned the oven down to 450. It was at 475. The white loaf is supposed to cook at a little lower temp, but the same exact time. And the only other difference is I'm gonna sprinkle some flour. Hold on just a second, Eli. I'm gonna sprinkle some flour on the bottom just because I'm out of parchment paper, actually. Oh, it's smoking. I'm gonna just get this dough out into a ball. I might need a little bit of flour on my hands since it's a little gooier. I'm gonna dump that in there too. Try not to use too much flour on it, just enough to be able to shape it a little. And I dumped it down in here. It's not in a perfect ball shape, so it won't come out perfectly round, but it's fine. Now to put the lid back on and stick it back in the oven. 30 minutes with the lid on, another 15 to 20 with it off. Here it is. This bread looks so good. I have a really big Dutch oven, but that's the loaf. The making of bread, take 3. Today is day 3 of this video. I promise they're easy recipes. My house is just very loud, and I wanted it to be quiet when I'm filming this. So the first bread recipe you saw, actually the white bread tasted really good. I tried a bit of it. I think we'll make that more often. But some of my kids like the brown one better, so I don't know. We had the white one with dinner last night and the brown one for lunch. Ate a lot of bread yesterday. So that one I think is my cheapest recipe. I will say, let's call that the cheapest one. Today I'm gonna make the fastest. In terms of fastest from I want bread, how quickly can I have bread in my hands? This recipe only takes about an hour. Now I do have a KitchenAid mixer, but I think you can do it without it. You just have to work a little harder. And I do have, I think, the website, the blog I got this one from too. So I will link it below. I want to give credit where credit is due. Check out her blog if you want to know more about this recipe than I can tell you. We're gonna start out with 3 cups of water. This recipe is so fast. Actually, I'm gonna start out, I keep my recipe up here in my cupboard. I'm gonna start out by heating the oven to 200 degrees. It is not totally quiet in here. You might hear children playing, but at least my little ones are all napping at the same time. Glory, hallelujah, that has not happened in 3 days. So I'm gonna start with 3 cups of warm water that are approximately 110 degrees. I just do really warm water. I don't have an internal thermometer or an external thermometer. I think we do have a meat thermometer, but I don't even know where it is right now. Okay, so for bread recipes, I really try to be as exact as I can. So I got my water in there. For experiment's sake, let's hope I don't get distracted by a small child. But it is You see that? 240. Let's see when this recipe is done by. It also is pretty easy. Easy is a requirement for me, like I said, and I don't do hard. I don't do extremely intensive things because I get interrupted a lot. So I'm gonna put in a tablespoon of yeast. I buy my yeast at Sam's Club in a big bulk. I keep it in the freezer until I'm ready to use it, then I pull it out. I don't keep it in the freezer when I'm going to be using it because I tried that. That doesn't work very well. I'll leave small portions of it in my pantry when I'm using it. Sometimes I do fridge. Pantry or fridge is good. Using it directly from the freezer does not work quite as well. I've tried. So I'm mixing that into the warm water. And next up, I'm gonna add some honey. Okay, I mixed my honey in with my yeast and my water. Next up, I'm gonna add oil, flour, and salt. So I'm using whole wheat flour, and I'm using coconut oil, which I have to melt to get it to liquid form. I warmed up my coconut oil so it's liquid form, and I'm gonna put a 1/3 cup in this water mixture. Next, I'm gonna put about 6.5 cups of whole wheat flour into this mixture. And 1 tablespoon of salt. Okay, actually it was 7 cups of flour that I was supposed to do, so I added another 1/2 cup, and then I'm using the dough hook on my KitchenAid, but this is where you could knead it yourself. I could turn it on like just the second setting, and I'm gonna run it for 10 minutes. By the way, I got a long phone call in there. So that's gonna affect my ending time. So I'm gonna knead that for 10 minutes. This says medium to high speed, but according to my KitchenAid manual, it's better to do it on a lower speed, so I kinda do medium low. And now I'm gonna keep adding about 1/2 cup. I do it about a tablespoon at a time. I'm gonna add flour to my mixture to keep it pulling away from the sides. I have realized that sometimes my mixture, it might be my climate here too, or my elevation or whatever, calls for a little more whole wheat flour. And I've read sometimes that if you're making it in winter or summer, it's different. So I keep adding it by the tablespoonful to keep making sure it comes away from the side. You can have an orange. So sometimes that means a lot more than the 7.5 cups that it calls for. So I'll add up to 1/2 cup more and then keep adding as needed. A lot of women who follow this channel that actually are like homesteaders and expert bread makers and canners and do all the things and do them so well. And I am sure down in the comments below you will find out some tips that make it better or easier or fill in the blank. I'll even be checking out those comments myself. You may want to check down there before you make it yourself in case I'm doing something that could be better. I was intimidated to make bread for a long time, and it's not as hard as it looks. Sometimes it doesn't turn out perfectly, but if you keep trying to figure out what you're doing wrong, use Google as your resource. You can make bread. You can make bread and it makes your house smell amazing, and it tastes so much better than grocery store or store-bought bread. I turned it up to about a 3 out of 10 on the setting. I kept adding tablespoons till I forgot how many I had added. But I added it until it started really catching all the dough off the sides and the bottom. This is 9 minutes in. We got 1 more minute. Here is my dough. As you can see, it's pretty sticky, but I'm gonna oil my hands a little and get it out. And maybe have a kid film for me here so I can show you how I do it. So Micah's filming me here. I'm trying to get all this dough out, and it's a bit sticky, so I have my hands oiled. And now I'm going to divide it into 2 loaves. Does this look like scientifically correct? Exactly 2 loaves? Probably not. And I'm going to put it down in these pans flat. These pans were greased already, so next I'm going to just stick it in the oven for 20 minutes on 200. Now I'm going to get 2 loaves started in my bread makers. So this is the 3rd kind. I would say this is the most hands off because you literally dump the stuff in, push the buttons, and come back 3 hours later for fresh bread. I have 2 bread machines. If you're in the market for bread machines, if you've ever thought about getting one, I like the Oster or what I have. I had one given to me. Actually, I had both given to me. A viewer sent us one, and my friend had another one sitting in a cupboard she wasn't using and said, please take my bread maker. Whoa, I turned this one on. Stop. You can get one oftentimes at a garage sale or a thrift store when they open again. If you're not in a hurry, you can get them for like $8, $12. You can get them for very little. And then if you don't like it, it's not a lot of money wasted because they run more like a lot more than that. Anyway, I am thankful for my bread makers. I've used them a lot. I've run bread makers into the ground. And then sometimes I go through seasons where they sit in my storeroom and I don't use them at all. So it kind of depends on how I'm feeling and how much money I want to save. I have made a couple of white sandwich loaves in the past and they get devoured really quickly. So maybe in this season here, I'll try some of those out again. Even if you're making a white loaf of bread and maybe have a little sugar in it, you know what's going in it. And I think it's probably still a lot healthier, a lot better for you than what you're buying at the store. So I guess I need to see it that way too sometimes probably. And if I run out of whole wheat flour, that is how I will see it. Okay, so for this recipe, we're going to do a cup of milk. This one I may not be making too much in this season because milk is hard to find for us, especially enough for our family, and we're literally only using it to put in our oatmeal, in our granola, and for making yogurt. We're not drinking it at all right now because we can't find enough of it for that. Can't even find powdered milk. But I'm obviously using it in my bread now too. Whoa. You don't see that. Next I'm gonna do 2/3 cup of warm water. Okay, I forgot to set a timer on my bread, I just realized. And it has been 20 minutes. I got distracted again. Another phone call. I'm gonna leave my loaves of bread in there. Let me show you them. They rose up, they're over the top, so good enough for me. I'm gonna raise my oven temperature to 350 and cook them for 30 minutes. Then they're done, that's it. Okay, I take that back. Actually, it's 25 minutes, not 30. 25 minutes. Next, I threw in 2 tablespoons of butter. I always make sure it's softened. I don't want it real hard from the fridge. Then 2 tablespoons of honey and 2 teaspoons of salt. So funny, making all these loaves one after another. It just reminds you that all bread is made up of the same basic things. They're just different ways to get to the end. Next, I'll do 3 3/4 cup of whole wheat flour. I put my flour in this container because I can scoop it out more precisely. Much better in this than in a bag. And especially for the bread machines, I like to be as precise as possible because they're a little more finicky. Next, I kind of spread that flour out. I'm making 2 of these obviously, but I don't want the salt to touch the yeast too early, so that's why I kind of cover up all the liquid. Next is 3/4 cups of oats, seeds, or flax. I'm using oats, I usually do, but I have used flax a lot in the past, or a combination of oats and flax, flaxseed. I haven't just used seeds. I'm not even sure what seeds I'd use, but that's definitely an option. And I lay it just on top there. Can I spread it out? I love having 2 bread machines because if I'm gonna go through all this mess and get all this stuff out, I might as well double my efforts quickly. We're a big family, so we're gonna eat it anyway. But if you didn't and you wanted to double your efforts, they do freeze well. Next is vital wheat gluten. This step is definitely optional. I think it makes the loaf rise a little better, be a little fluffier, softer. So I do 2 tablespoons of this, but you can definitely skip that. Finally, I'm going to put my yeast in. I'm gonna just make a little indentation in the middle there. And I'll do 2½ teaspoons of yeast. Kind of pour it in there. And, oh, 1/4. Did I say 2½? 2 1/4. I'll write this recipe, though, like I said, in the description box, so you can just figure it out. Okay, now to get my bread machines going, I'm going to set them on the whole wheat flour setting, which is number 3 for me, and loaf size 2 pounds. Color, I always do light. So that one's 3 hours and 23 minutes. These loaves are dancing. Okay, it's actually 4:10, but I had a lot of distractions. And here they are. They look good.
Mommy,
Hope's excited.
Butter.
I'm making butter? I'm making bread. I wish I knew how to make butter. Next year. So those loaves look really nice. This one grew a lot. And they will taste great. Obviously really nice size for slicing up. And my house smells amazing. Here are the final loaves of bread. One is a little taller than the other, but they look great, smell great, and rose pretty nice.